Let's jump into topic. Here's what I want to do. I want to talk about specifically artificial intelligence and what's happening with artificial intelligence and how it's impacting the world of selling. All right, we'll talk about that in terms of training and talent and all that. But let me start with asking you a couple quick questions. When I ask you, what is the art of selling? What is the first thing you think about? Like, what is the art of selling? Just quietly think about that for a second. Now, if I were to ask you, what is the science of selling? You have a different answer? So, if I were to ask you, is selling, now I used to ask this question, is selling more art or a science? People would answer. Now everyone's like, you know, they debate with me. Well, it's both, so I get it, it's both. But is selling more of an art or more of a science? So raise your hand if you think selling is more of an art than a science. How about more science than art? Wow, Sam, that's crazy. So 5 years ago, asking this question, it was maybe 10%, 15% of people would say science. More and more you talk about this, more and more people are saying this is all about, I'm sorry, people would say it's art, now it's all about the science. I'm in this, like I think about my career in sales from the very, very get-go. Everything I did was centered around selling and sales. And I'll share a very quick story. A big part of it's because of my dad. And he grew up a sales guy. I mean, a sales guy, the art type of sales guy in the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And he would come home and tell stories about selling. And it wasn't the science part. It wasn't like, oh, I looked at my funnel and it's 42% chance of closing. No, it would talk about the stories and kind of the art part of his job. And he told me one story that's always stuck with me, and I'm going to share it partially because it's a story about Las Vegas, and obviously there's a lot going on in Las Vegas. I was there last week at the Mandalay Bay talking about the same topic. So I'll share that the story about Las Vegas in respect of everything that's going on there. My dad was selling, anybody knows Steve Wynn? Hey, raise your hand if you've been to Las Vegas. Okay, tons of you. Okay, so Steve Wynn was the general manager of the Golden Nugget. If you've ever been to the Golden Nugget. Way back when. And he had this idea to bring a little bit more sizzle, a little bit more pizzazz into Vegas. And so he wanted to have the first big electronic billboard in Vegas, and it would say the Golden Nugget, right? And so my dad was there trying to sell him that sign, right? So they've been working on it for months and months and months, and they finally kind of got to the design, got to the final moment, the contract was written, he's in Steve Wynn's office in the Golden Nugget to get it signed, to get it done. And the way my dad tells it is this kind of long office, and his desk was by the window at the very, very end, so he's down there, and they couldn't agree to $100,000. They were $100,000 off of the agreement. Now, like at the time, I'm on all the details, but apparently Steve Wynn just assumed my dad would just take it, just do it. And I think my dad just assumed that Steve Wynn would just pay for it. And so they just couldn't come to an agreement. And so it was like, okay, well, packing my stuff up now, gonna leave, like we're not gonna do this. Steve goes, see you later. Too bad we couldn't get this deal done. So he's walking down the hall, which is his office, and he gets to the door and he stops. And my dad turns around and he goes, hey, we've worked way too hard for this. We're in Vegas, let's flip for it. Right? Now, if you know anything about Steve Wynn's history and background, he's actually not a big gambler. So, see, I guess Steve was a little bit off, like, okay, said, fine, let's do that. Let's do it. So my dad, strolls back to the thing, grabs a quarter. He goes, Steve, you call it. And he goes, heads. So he flips it, tails, shows it to Steve Wynn. Steve looks at the contract, grabs the contract out, signs it, deal's done. Now, good news is the sign went, you could actually look it up. It's a big kind of iconic billboard, the first big electronic billboard in Vegas. He and Steve are cutting the red ribbon and everything. It was a big success. Although, just to share this one part, story doesn't quite end there. My dad and my mom went to Vegas when Wynn opened up, like the big Wynn hotel opened up. And he calls me up and he says, hey, we're going to go to the Wynn, taking your mother. I was like, that's great, Mom, or Dad. He's like, hey, I'm going to reach out to Steve Wynn, see if he remembers me, to see if I can get an upgrade. I was like, I don't know, Dad. You know, lots have happened between now and then. He's going to write him a letter. I was like, he may just want to send him an email or something. I don't know. But he's like, no, I'm going to do it. Fine. So he calls me when he gets there, and he's like, oh, you're not going to believe this. We got upgraded. Now, who knows? I mean, they probably just had a big room. I mean, I don't know if he really ever got upgraded. But they ended up having a great weekend, and upon checkout, my dad goes down and gets the bill, and it says, you know, room accommodation, whatever the price is, and then it says payable to Steve Wynn, $100,000. And he flips the bill over, and it says, I should have called Tails. And so I tell the story because I think about selling today. No chance that story happens today. No chance. I mean, there's no way people are flipping for contracts right now, right? And I think about the evolution of sales and how much science is now being put into this thing to a really accelerated rate. Here's what we believe fundamentally is that selling will always be art and science. It'll never just be science, no matter what people think. It will always be both, and you have to excel at both. However, and this is the really, really important part, is that the science is accelerating. And it is going to require a new way of thinking and a new way of execution. All right? So let me talk about a part of that, specifically around artificial intelligence and what's going on, specifically just in the world of selling, how it's impacting selling. We just did this big research. We bought a company called CSO Insights over the past couple of years, and they've done this big research around artificial intelligence specific to sales and what's real and what's not real. Right? Now, here's a real simple model, very pedestrian in terms of kind of explaining different things around analytics. There's obviously just your basic analytics, which is you're doing the insights, you're using structured data, and if you want to enhance it, you got to do it yourself. That's what you do on a spreadsheet. Big data is you begin putting some business rules in it, some technology around it, and you start using unstructured data. So you're actually looking at data, things in blog posts or PDF files, things that are not in rows and columns. But again, if you want to enhance it, you got to do it. Big jump off between this and essentially AI. Deep learning AI is now the technology is actually doing the insights. You're looking at structured and unstructured data, but it also improves itself. So as it sees patterns, it writes new business rules. So that's a really important breaking point between that and just good old analytics. All right? Now when you start talking about general purpose stuff, it's not only creating business rules, but it's actually developing new code. Right? So we can't really find a valid example of that in anything that impacts the world of selling. However, we do see examples of deep learning. Now, why is this important? Because the world of selling is getting harder. So here is, studied thousands of organizations, and we ask them a simple question around how is their reps against quota, how many people are making. And you can see since 2012 to 2016, it's gone down. This year's it went down even further, 53%. So 53% of reps are making quota, on average across all industries, all shapes and sizes. Now we can cut this across different industries and shapes and sizes, and we're still seeing a decline. The number you want to see is not 100%, right? You don't want 100% of your reps making quota. That means what? Comp plans, not so great. So you essentially want 2/3 of your people, all right, making it. So 53% still not great, not good at all. So I think the time is right now for technology to help drive more sales performance. But here, to me, is the kind of, I alluded to this in our panel earlier, this is the most important point if you're going to walk away with this thing, is today when you study what actual reps do in a day, not going to be surprising, but majority of it is actually not selling, right? There's a ton of other things that reps do, from administrative stuff to doing research on prospects and customers, internal processes, whatever it might be. We bucket those two things, all things into two categories. Tedium, which is all that stuff, whether it's admin or research or whatever it might be, and then ingenuity. Ingenuity is when you're really getting the creativity out of a sales rep, when they're actually in the moment, where they're providing value, where they're doing something that is unique to their ability. Okay? Today's world, the vast majority of the stuff is tedium. All right? Not a lot of debate there, but this is where AI technology is going to make a huge difference. What we believe is in the short term here, not too far out, this will completely change. That the amount of time that people have as reps will be the vast majority of that will be ingenuity in very little tedium, which begs the question that I posed in the panel today. Do you have the sales reps that are equipped to spend all their time doing that? Is that the profile of the rep that you really have to drive the appropriate value? And what we're seeing is we think that's going to have a next generation of talent, which I'll get into. Now, we looked at, I think it was 58 companies that had claimed very specific deep learning AI capability, right? And out of that, 18 companies actually had it, where we talked to real customers, where real things are happening, where their applications are really generating new business rules. It's not analytics, it's not big data, it's actually AI. So the facts are this is a really emerging, kind of very, very early stage development, if you will, in terms of real sales enablement tools out there today. Again, there's over 400 tech companies that have sales enablement tools. 18 of them, I'd argue, actually have real deep learning, real AI capabilities. But let me talk about what some of them do. This won't be an advertisement for any company, so I'll just kind of talk about capabilities. But it will give you a sense of the explosion of what's going to happen in the next 5 years-ish. All right? One premise you have to buy into. You have to buy into this or the whole conversation doesn't work. And that is that in the future, everything a sales rep does, I mean everything a sales rep does, will be captured, understood, and analyzed. I was in a meeting a few months ago with one of the big Japanese brand companies all of you would know, and they're trying to develop a sales Fitbit that salespeople would wear. And essentially, it monitors everything. It knows your schedule, it knows what meetings you're in, it knows your heart rate, it knows what you're asking, it knows what you're saying, it knows everything about you. And they wanted to partner with us on behavioral stuff. And it was a little freaky because I'm watching these demos, we're talking about this, and I'm asking some fundamental questions that may get in the way of adoption. And it dawned on me that, yeah, maybe today, if that was a product that rolled out, it wouldn't be in everyone's hands. But is it hard to believe that in 5 or 10 years, that's not a reality? I mean, I think it could be. I don't know about that certain product. But the point is, everything you do, say, and behave will just be known. All right, and if you get your head around that, now you can start imagining the technology and the capability that you can wrap around that concept. All right, and I'll share a couple of those with you. Here's an example of technology that's out there today. I mean, imagine how much time sales reps spend qualifying deals, or they have a qualification sheet, or they go through certain analysis on, is this going to be a winner or a loser? A lot of companies actually don't do this well, even the basic stuff. But there's technology out there today that has AI capability that does that for you. So deal comes in, it understands who are you actually buying, who are your buying influences, what are they trying to solve, what do you do, and then have you done that before in an industry? How good are you? How good is the rep at doing this? Goes out in public data, unstructured data around blog posts, around anything that's public about the individuals that are on that deal to figure out, is this a real opportunity or not a real opportunity? Does it match what you do well? And it comes up with a formula to say, here's what we think your probability of winning is, and here's what we think you got to go do. And it gets better over time. It watches patterns. It learns from you as a sales rep, winning and losing deals. All right? Actually, fairly immature product right now, but you could imagine that getting really good. So imagine all the tedium involved in researching people on LinkedIn, or figuring out who I should talk to, or trying to figure out ways to add value in a sales process and what do these people care about. All that stuff gets taken care of. Now the time spent is actually having the conversation, actually adding value, the ingenuity part. That becomes the entire job. There's another one. I mean, how many people use WebEx or some type of teleconferencing, right? Okay, that's great. A lot of people do. So a lot of technology now being built around these things. I mean, again, if you're having a conversation and it's over the internet, is everything data? Sure is. So now these applications in some cases, are listening to you. So you're having the conference call with your client, it knows your agenda, and it says things like, hey man, stop talking so much. Ask a question. Or just answer a problem question. What are the implications to that problem? And it essentially is your online coach. And it gets to know you, right? Not hard to believe. It's available. Or it logs the entire conversation, measures and records the thing, matches it to the agenda, recognizes whether you got the action commitments or next steps, as we heard earlier, or not, sends this to your sales manager, so no longer that discussion is, oh, hey, had that meeting go, oh, it went great. It's, I already know how that meeting went. Changes the complete dynamics between those two individuals. All right? So this stuff is out there now. Another example in our world would be, again, if you could imagine all things being captured in terms of how you go after deals and how you think about growing accounts, recommending training. I mean, training and development, which is kind of very generic, is going to get turned into very personalized small bits and pieces of content going to an individual and exactly they need to learn. All right, we've talked a lot about this today in the sense of selling models today have evolved, and the biggest evolution of selling models today is this idea that individuals need to add value in the process, right? No longer is it good just to show up and ask good questions. Not good enough. You have to show up and ask good questions, but then you also have to show up and add value in the process, and there's lots of ways, we talked about some of that in the last session, lots of ways you can add value in the process by helping to educate your customer. But again, the ability to actually do that is harder than it sounds. I mean, it sounds pretty easy. It sounds like common sense, just not common practice. All right? So there was this research study that showed, that asked all these buyers, what is the single reason you went with the winner versus the losers? Number one was they educated me or gave me a perspective. That's the number one reason I went with them. All right? So much technology, including Showpad out there, that actually helps you do this. There's a ton of innovation around here. The concept is turning a salesperson into a content marketer. That they understand how to provide content to a sales situation, not in terms of a value proposition. That's interesting but not important. But it's actually content that individual buyer desperately needs or wants. Okay, and they can use it to help them. Okay, there's another groupings of technology that are interesting where it actually helps put solution architecture together. So it actually helps develop solutions. It says, okay, given everything that's going on, here's what the solution should be. Here's how to think about pricing it. Here are the objections that you're going to probably hear. And here is content wrapped up for you to begin taking to your client. Doesn't mean it's 100% there, but it gives you a start in terms of being able to represent that to a client. This is actually, in this area of technology, where we're seeing majority of venture capital money going into this area. All right. So here's something I want you to think about. All of this advancement in AI and all this money being spent in technology for sales, you have to ask the question, how is it going to help me? Like, is it really going to help drive more sales performance? Like, is that true or false? We have done this research that looked at thousands and thousands of companies, and we've mapped them on this matrix here. It's really simple. It says, okay, for every company, how is your sales process? Do you just throw people out there and you're as good as that individual is out there selling? A lot of companies do that. An example of industries that do that would be like a law firm. Okay? There's no real sales process for lawyers. All right? Informal process, which means there actually is a sales process out there. There's a document somewhere on somebody's laptop somewhere, or maybe even on a wall, but really nobody follows it. Really, people still kind of go out there and just sell the way they want to sell. Tons of companies in there. Then there's the formal process, which is actually there is an organizational execution around how we go and chase business. We have a methodology in which we execute against to win business, to grow accounts. Okay? And everyone follows it. And then finally is not only do you do that, but you learn and evolve that process based on what you learn from metrics. Okay, now if that's your sales process, this is how you connect with your client. Do you just show up and throw up product? Possibly. Are you a preferred supplier? You still just sell product, but you are a preferred supplier. You understand how your product adds value. No problem. Big jump here, solutions consultant, which means you actually, your sales reps show up, they ask good questions, they get their needs, they understand what they do, and then they present them content or present them a solution. Majority of sales organizations in B2B space fit that. The next two are totally different. This is what everyone's aspiring to, is what we've been talking about. Strategic contributor is you show up and you add value in the sales process. So this is where you start understanding industry trends, you start understanding, specific business objectives that they're trying to get done, and you show them value along the way. And then trusted partner is you've done that and you kind of earn that seat at the table. I talked about that example with Papa John's and Pepsi. It's a very real, very good example of where a company has come in, added value to an organization. It has nothing to do with selling them anything. Okay? Now, here's the deal. Of the thousands of companies we've looked at, here's the distribution of where companies plot in here. I don't think this would be very surprising. 26% of the firms over here, 30% there, the majority in the middle. Majority of companies are informal process solutions consultant. Now here's where it's interesting, important, is the fact that performance varies. As you go northeast, your performance increases, okay? You have a better level of performance across these 5 metrics as you move northeast. So therefore, you want to go that way. And that's where AI comes in. In each one of these examples, it shows how you can drive better process and better ways to connect with your customer, right? So this is where, when you look at funding proposals for a lot of these AI projects, they get after tackling one of these two things for their end customers. Now, as I said earlier today, I think the reality is that talent is going to have to evolve. If you really think about a technology-rich environment where your job is all about ingenuity, it has nothing to do with tedium anymore. It's not about being persistent, or it's not about doing great research on LinkedIn, but it is truly about accelerating at the moment where you can connect with a client. If that's the sole job, and being able to add value and move up to a strategic contributor, the basic traits of salespeople will evolve over time. I mentioned this earlier around EQ and IQ. If today the balance of the profile of a rep is kind of more EQ than it is IQ, more influential traits than it is kind of analytical traits, if you will, we think that's going to shift. Doesn't mean it's not important. It just means that that balance will shift. And one of the things we know why that's true is this. Is science, technology, math, and engineering. People with those backgrounds is 56% increase in sales roles. You're finding more and more STEM backgrounds getting into sales. Well, why would that be? Because they are better problem solvers. They work in technology-rich environments naturally. All right, so this idea of how you become a content marketer, how you take complex situations, putting content together, adding value to a customer, it's easier for them. So we're seeing this huge shift in a talent profile. So I'll leave it with 4 things. There's 4 things that we believe to be really important in the future of selling. Number 1 is sales organizations must start thinking right now about working in a technology-driven environment. I mean, the facts are the future is here today. It's just not evenly distributed, all right? Organizations that are embracing this now, that understand this now, that are trying to drive down tedium, drive up ingenuity, leverage technology to do that, thinking hard about their talent, and from a process perspective, trying to operate at an organizational execution, are finding much more success than everyone else. But that requires a lot of courage and a lot of change. As I said, number 2 earlier, you got to think hard about the talent. You've got to think about this organizational execution. This idea of just sending reps out because they're great as individuals isn't going to work. And this one final thought, I haven't talked a lot about it today. I mentioned it in the panel. We believe pretty strongly that there's going to be a shift in roles. As I said, there's 26 million or so salespeople out there today. We think about 10 to 15% will be repurposed, essentially, where they're doing the majority of their job might be in that tedium. That actually might be their job. That stuff's going to go away, and those people are going to be deployed to what we believe will be more strategic roles in account management type of stuff. It's going to be more and more important to protect and grow current work, current accounts. And so strategies and human capital will be more and more deployed to those functions. As you automate some of the lead gen, some of that hunting, some of that upfront stuff, you're going to deploy more deeper, more advanced human capital and account management strategies. We see that trend happening in the next 5 to 10 years. All right, the clock just went on, so I think we're good.